The man collapsed 6 feet in front of me. His glasses snapped. One lens kept blinking in the rain like a broken signal. Nobody ran. Nobody screamed. We just stood there on Glienicke Bridge, waiting for someone to admit it was a mistake. The briefcase lay between us, wet, unopened. My fingers twitched. My handler didn't look at me. And the Soviet across from us. He smiled, not a smirk, not triumph, just something quiet. Like the kind of peace you get when a decision's already been made. That was the moment I knew I was on the wrong side of the right operation. And still I picked up the briefcase. I should have walked away. I didn't. If that made your pulse skip, you're exactly who I want listening. Subscribe and drop your country in the comments. What comes next was never meant to be seen. We were told to arrive early. Not because of protocol, but because of fog. The kind that made everything look like it belonged in someone else's memory. It was March 1978, and Glienicke Bridge hadn't changed. Same green steel bones, same quiet tension painted into every rivet. I stood by the east pillar, dressed like a Swedish attach. Fake name, real nerves. The kind you don't admit you still get after 10 years in Berlin. The handoff was simple. One of ours for one of theirs. 2 cars, 2 briefcases. A 20-meter walk and nothing spoken. I wasn't in charge. I was just there to observe and log. That's what they wrote on my assignment slip. But when the Soviet stepped out, I saw it instantly. His briefcase was an old brown Samsonite with worn corners. By the time it reached our side, it wasn't that one dot. The switch didn't happen during the walk. I watched every step. It wasn't sleight of hand. It was orchestration. The man walking for us, Thompson, a cultural attach, turned convenient trade piece. He looked at the briefcase for a second too long before passing it on. Not fear, not hesitation, recognition. I didn't say anything. Nobody did. The CIA officer collecting the briefcase acted like he'd seen it before. Standard nod, tight grip, straight into the car. No whispers. No side glances. Just rehearsed indifference. That silence told me everything. After the exchange, I stayed behind under the pretense of securing radio logs. But really, I stood by the center of the bridge and stared at the line where east became west. My breath fogged the glass of my fake diplomat badge. That briefcase, they hadn't even checked it. They didn't want to. Later that night, back at the flat Langley gave me in Moabit, I pulled out the note I'd scribbled in my coat pocket. Just 3 words. Briefcase. Wrong model. It should have gone in a report. But I burned the page instead, because I already knew what would happen if someone read it and already knew. The real question wasn't why the briefcase changed. It was who planned for us not to notice. I left the apartment lights off that night, sat by the window, kept thinking about the way the Soviets smiled, not like someone who had outsmarted us, but like someone who no longer had to try. That should have been the end of it. But 3 days later, the briefcase showed up again, in my hotel room. Hotel Silt, Charlottenburg. Room 412. The kind with peeling wallpaper that never quite falls off. Like the room knows no one's meant to stay long. It was Tuesday night. I'd gone to bed without dinner. Not for lack of appetite, just habit. In Berlin, you learn to sleep light. The sound was soft. Not the door, the case. A subtle latch click, one I hadn't heard go in, but I heard settle. When I got up, it was there, sitting on the chair by the window. Same model as the one from Glienicke, but newer, cleaner, and the smell. That sharp, undeniable tang of fresh leather. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the edge of the bed for nearly an hour, just watching it. Called no one. Langley didn't give me a clean line. I considered taking it to the local station, but I wasn't suicidal. Eventually, I touched it. Different weight. Centered mass. Not metallic. Not loose. Like whatever was inside was absorbing the silence dot. My original orders were crystal clear. Do not engage. Observe only. But this wasn't part of the op anymore. Or maybe it never was. At 3:12 a.m. I turned on the desk lamp. Put on gloves. Popped the CLASPS dot. It opened clean. One sheet inside. Thick paper. No folds. Still, it felt heavy. The letter was handwritten. Russian. Blue ink. Wavering strokes. No code words. No dates. Just one thing at the top. For Lev. I couldn't translate it all. But I didn't need to. It wasn't a report. It was a plea. It spoke of a sick child, a betrayal, and someone who knew too much and wanted out. This hadn't leaked. It had been delivered. I sealed it in plastic, closed the briefcase, and slid it under the bed. Didn't sleep. Just sat in the dark and watched Berlin shift shades through the window. In the morning, I stared into the mirror. The eyes looking back, they weren't looking for enemies. They were scanning for proof that we still cared. And that's what scared me most. Maybe we didn't. I didn't take it to the station chief, didn't file a copy, didn't even use the encoded channel at Zoo Palace, though I walked by it twice. Instead, I made a single call to a man named Carter, old-school cryptographer from Langley, who owed me a favor he never liked to admit. I didn't tell him what I had. Just said, I've got something handwritten. You'll want to see it sober. We met in a print shop near Savignyplitz. Neutral. Ground. No cameras. I handed him a carbon copy I'd made of the letter. He read it twice, jaw tight. Then circled one word. Sigma. He looked up. Do you know what that is? I shrugged. He didn't smile. Sigma file isn't supposed to exist, he said. It's not a file. It's a container. Movement logs, psychological profiles, internal risk assessments, all on our own people. Our people? Double agents, embedded assets, high-value switches gone quiet. Every operative who's ever triggered internal suspicion. That's when I noticed his hands. He was trembling. I'd seen Carter analyze 6-letter ciphers under gunfire. He didn't rattle easy. This wasn't sent to expose anything. He said, it was sent as a warning. Whoever wrote this new Sigma was breached. That word breached landed heavier than the briefcase ever had. We didn't talk after that. I left him the letter, told him to disappear. He nodded once, folded the page with military precision, and walked out like he'd never seen me. Back in my room, I replayed the lines I understood. The mention of Lev, the girl, the phrase, they turned her voice into leverage. It stuck in my throat. The letter wasn't intelligence. It was confession. And confessions were dangerous because they implied guilt. Ours, maybe. That night, I didn't sleep again. Instead, I dug through an old black binder of unclassified Soviet personnel. Logs, something I'd kept as a habit more than anything. There were dozens of Levs, but one stood out. Lev Sokolov. KGB counterintelligence. Last known station, Copenhagen. I underlined his name. Circled the date, 1974. Then packed my bag. By morning, I had a forged Danish passport, half a bottle of vodka, and one question I couldn't shake. Why send a letter like that to someone who disappeared 4 years ago? Copenhagen didn't feel safe. Not because it wasn't. It was cleaner, quieter, and more polite than Berlin would ever be. But because it felt like a city where nothing should happen, which made it the perfect place for everything to go wrong. I found him in a bookshop that smelled like dust and cinnamon. Second floor, back corner, poetry section. Lev Sokolov. Older than his last photo. Scar on his left cheek that hadn't been there in '74. Still had the posture of a man who expected. enough bullets to come through walls. I didn't introduce myself. Just stood beside him and said, "I think something meant for you got rerouted." He didn't turn, just nodded slowly and reached for a thin volume of Danish poems. Drøm om Danmark, A Dream of Denmark. Opened it halfway, tore the binding just a touch. Inside was a microfiche. He handed it to me like it was a receipt. "We're not the only ones looking," he said. Only then did he glance at me. His eyes had nothing left in them. No allegiance. No surprise. "What's on?" I asked. "You already know." I didn't, but I didn't push. Back at my hotel, I ran it through a field reader. Images, scanned typewritten pages, photographs. A single name appeared 7 times each time, redacted differently. But one frame stopped me cold. It was a photograph of a woman at a gala. American, elegant, hand extended, laughing. I'd met her 2 weeks earlier, U.S. ambassador to West Germany. We'd shared a drink. She touched my wrist as she spoke like she knew something. I didn't. That same photo showed her standing beside a known KGB intermediary. Same time. Same room. Different sides of the game. I read the header. Sigma 13 Cross Asset Analysis. Blue assets within Western political apparatus. Blue assets. That term wasn't in the field manual, but I'd heard whispers in Langley. A code for internal assets under external control. I leaned back, felt the air flatten, realized the letter hadn't been a leak. It was a breadcrumb, a trail someone wanted followed, but only by someone already expendable. And now I had the next piece, but I also had a new problem. The woman in the photo, she wasn't just an ambassador. She had clearance above mine, and I'd just seen her shaking hands with someone we were told didn't exist. He wasn't there when I went back. The bookshop was open. Same clerk, same smell, but no Leff. I asked for him using his cover name. "Mr. Novak." The clerk just shrugged. "He left this morning," he said. Didn't say where. Then paused, tilted his head. "Left a book for you, though." He reached under the counter and handed me a thin hardback. Worn spine, dog-eared corners. It was the same poetry book, and Drøm om Danmark. But this one was heavier. Upstairs in my hotel, I checked every page. No microfiche this time, but there was a folded map tucked inside, hand-drawn, marked with 4 red X's across Copenhagen. One was circled. Underneath, in faint pencil, Sankt Annie Plaids, midnight. I arrived early. It was raining, and the plaza was quiet, just the sound of bicycles and distant gulls. The statue in the center looked cleaner than it should have, like someone had scrubbed it recently. Too recently. At 11:57 I felt it. That crawl along the neck, like being watched by someone good at it. But no one approached, no signals, no brush pass. I waited until 12:30, then walked the perimeter. Found nothing, until I returned to my room. On the desk was a photograph, black and white, taken from across the street. It showed me, standing under the statue, looking lost, looking visible. Someone had been there. Someone close, on the back of the eye. Photo, another note typed, not handwritten. Stop digging. That night I didn't sleep again. Copenhagen was now tainted, and Leff, either gone or already dead, had passed the burden to me without asking. I sat by the window, thinking about the way he looked in the shop, like a man who had accepted that he'd die knowing something no one would believe. I still didn't know what Sigma really was, but I knew what it did. It isolated. It erased, and now it had my name on it too. I flew back to Berlin under a different name. Customs didn't blink. Neither did I. By the time I reached my flat in Moabit, the microfiche had already been copied and coded. I wasn't worried about losing it. I was worried about what I'd seen on it. The ambassador's face wouldn't leave my head. Laughing, glass in hand, standing next to a man whose name had appeared on 7 separate CIA kill lists. She had clearance. She had charm. She had dinner with me 2 weeks ago in Bonn. We talked about architecture. She touched my wrist when she spoke about diplomacy. Now I understood the touch wasn't warmth. It was inventory. She was measuring what I knew, even if I didn't know it yet. I ran background again. Her file was spotless. Too spotless. No contradictions. No overlapping timelines. Just smooth. Surface. Someone had polished it. I reached out to Langley for confirmation on her assignments. The answer came back in half sentences. Information not available. Check with state. Security level mismatch. That mismatch meant one thing. She outranked me. Or worse, she wasn't working for us at all. That night, I went to a friend, a photo analyst stationed in the basement of Glienicke. I gave him the print. No context. He stared at it for a long time. Then, you see the reflection? He pointed at the champagne glass in her hand, reflected in the curve, barely visible, a second camera. Facing her, someone else was watching. Someone closer. I took the photo back. I didn't know if she was feeding Moscow or playing a longer game, but something else haunted me. In the background of that gala photo, standing in soft focus behind her was me, smiling, glass raised. I don't remember that moment, which means it was staged. She wasn't in the picture. I was. That's when I understood. The briefcase wasn't just delivered to me. I was part of the delivery. I tapped the line at dusk. Old relay hub outside Potsdam. Half-dead cables, pigeon shit on the eaves, but still alive barely. It used to carry Soviet logistics traffic before the war. Now it hummed with residual chatter, mostly noise. But that night, I caught a voice, female, confident, neutral tone, but trained like someone reading a story to an audience they couldn't see. She said one line, "In the end, men don't fear death. They fear what comes after." Then silence, no response. No frequency confirmation, just dead air. But I recognized the voice, not from the field, from the embassy. It was her, the ambassador. She wasn't speaking to me. She was speaking for me. Like a chess player narrating a move already made. The line went quiet for an hour after that, and pulsed once more. Short burst. 5 digits, no preamble. It was a coded signature, one I hadn't seen in years. I ran it through a dead Langley decoder. It mapped to an old operation called Night Room, terminated in 72 after one of ours. Defected. The defector had vanished near Kyiv. Name redacted in every document. But I remembered the story. He walked into Soviet territory with a suitcase and never came back. Same briefcase. Same brand. I went back to the audio. Played it 10 times. Listened not for the words, but for the background. At second 14, a faint clink. Not glass. Porcelain. She was calling from a dining room. I called an old field man at the embassy in Bonn. Told him I needed confirmation on her whereabouts. She's in Berlin. He said, been here 2 days. Private meetings. No press. Number. Press meant no record, which meant she was off the grid, but protected. I stared at the recorder, wondering who the message was really for, because it wasn't a threat. It was a verdict, not if I'd be erased. When I arranged the meet at Friedrichstrasse Station, a decoy on paper. I needed to confirm who was watching whom. I wore civilian. Neutral. Moved like a man without purpose. Newspaper tucked underarm. Train ticket in breast pocket. No visible urgency. A kind of man nobody remembers. My contact never showed. But I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was how quiet it all felt. No guards pacing, no rush hour crowd. Just the soft echo of footsteps and that old station smell, mildew, iron, and the faint bitterness of instant coffee. I waited 38 minutes. Then left. Didn't go straight home. Took 3 detours, doubled back once, stepped into a bakery, asked for bread I didn't want. Routine counter-surveillance. No tales. When I finally made it to my apartment, the envelope was already in the mailbox, unmarked, cream-colored, thick. Inside was a photo. Me, standing on the Friedrichstrasse platform. Time-stamped. 11:12 a.m. The exact moment I'd looked over my shoulder. It was taken from above. Not street level. Rooftop or telephoto from a distant building. They'd seen everything. The coat, the pause, the breath I held when I thought I might be followed. And they wanted me to know they saw it. There was no note, no warning, just the image. Framed perfectly. Composed like a painting, the message was clear. You are not the observer anymore. I sat on the floor, back against the door, photo in hand. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, quieter, like it was already forgetting I was there. That night, I packed a go bag, earned every page not already memorized, slept with the lights on, not because I was afraid, but because it was the last night. I'd be able to choose when the lights went out. His real name was classified. Everyone just called him Richter, ex-interrogator, retired, allegedly. Rumor was, he once got a GRU officer to confess using nothing but a stopwatch and absolute silence. Never raised his voice. Never blinked. I met him in a greenhouse on the outskirts of Wannsee. He was trimming orchids. You look tired, he said, not looking up. I look followed, I answered. That made him stop. I handed him the photo from Friedrichstrasse. He studied it longer than I liked. This was taken from your own side, he said. Our own building. Western lens. That's our framing. I didn't flinch. But inside, my stomach dropped. You sure? He nodded. Only our surveillance unit uses that angle. It's designed for internal control, damage management, threat containment. You mean defectors? No, he said. I mean liabilities. He motioned toward a bench. I sat. He wiped his hands. You were at Glienicke? I nodded. Then you should know, he said. That swap? It was theater. A show for press and paperwork. That man we traded back? He was already working for them. You mean? I mean, the briefcase wasn't the mistake, he cut in. It was the objective. I felt something crack, deep and quiet. Planted it? They passed it through us, with our consent. Not Langley's, not officially, but someone higher. Someone with enough clearance to override a red flag and bury it before it screamed. He leaned closer. That case was never meant to be analyzed. It was meant to find someone. Who? He stared at me. Didn't blink. You. I stood. Didn't say a word. My hands were steady, but only just. You opened it, he said. I didn't deny it. He exhaled. Picked up his shears again. Then, you're already marked. The Cody name was buried in a memo I was never supposed to see. Operative tag, pale blue code. It wasn't listed under active operations. It wasn't even in the archive. I found it scribbled in the margin of an old requisition form next to my name. Crossed out in pencil. Richter was right. I'd been marked. I followed the trail through outdated logs, disavowed mission reports, backdoor personnel records. The deeper I went, the colder it felt. Pale blue code wasn't an op. It was a faction, a substructure within the agency. High level, unlisted, invisible in plain sight. Their doctrine, information as leverage. Not weapon, not truth, leverage. They didn't stop leaks. They used them. The ambassador? She wasn't a rogue. She was part of it. So were 3 names I'd trusted for over a decade. All they're in the cross-referenced logs. Pale blue operatives. Embedded across NATO. Intelligence. Diplomacy. I found a notation next to her name. SIGMA 13. Handshake confirmed. That same phrase from the microfiche. I called Langley again. Spoke the phrase. Silence. Then a voice. We've escalated this internally. Stand by. Click. Nothing. For 3 days. I received no calls. No knocks. No cables. Just silence. It wasn't absence. It was suffocation. Then a parcel arrived. No return address. Inside, a single photo. The ambassador. Walking into the U.S. Embassy in Berlin. Smiling. On the back, a phrase typed in blue ink. She was never your enemy. You just looked too closely. They weren't threatening me. They were correcting me. Framing the truth I thought I'd found as a misunderstanding, but I knew the smell of new leather. I knew what it meant when too many files vanished at once. And I knew when a story had already been rewritten before anyone was allowed to read it. Pale Blue wasn't about lies. It was about editing. And now they were editing me. I went back to Berlin knowing 2 things. I wouldn't be welcomed. And I wouldn't be warmed. The embassy greeted me with polite detachment. No raised voices. No confrontation. Just absence. No meetings. No calls. No familiar faces in familiar places. My clearance badge didn't open the interior archive room anymore. I asked for reassignment protocols. They told me the system was under maintenance. The man at the front desk, a kid I'd trained, didn't even make eye contact, was still technically one of them, but not really. I sent a coded memo to Langley. It bounced. Tried the alternate channel. Nothing. They hadn't fired me. They hadn't suspended me. They'd made me unnecessary, which was worse. Because people like me don't get retirements. We get file numbers that stop returning results. 2 days later, my stipend froze. My Berlin flat received a maintenance order 1 I hadn't filed. Inside, someone had removed the floorboards beneath my desk. Only the nails remained. All my backups gone. Not stolen. Cleaned. I checked the mirror above the sink. There was a tiny scratch in the top right corner. That mirror hadn't been scratched before. They were watching. Not to monitor. To wait. I walked to the Tiergarten that night. Sat on a bench. Waited 3 hours. Nothing. The city was colder than I remembered. More indifferent. I'd opened something I wasn't meant to. Not just a case. A fault line. Pale Blue didn't want me gone. They wanted me buried visible, but irrelevant. I tried one last channel. Personal. I left a message with an old friend in Munich. No context. Just a phrase. The water is rising. He never responded. 3 days later, I received a package. Inside, a strip of film, blank, except for one frame. Me, sitting in the Tiergarten, looking up at nothing. The caption. That'll be enough. I crossed Glienicke again on a Tuesday. No fog this time. Just a light drizzle, and that quiet metal whine the bridge makes when you walk it alone. Tourists took photos. Children ran ahead of their parents. No one looked twice at the old man with the empty briefcase. It wasn't the same one, of course. That one had vanished, absorbed by whatever vault Pale Blue keeps for inconvenient objects. This one was from a flea market in Zellendorf. Identical model. Wrong story. I didn't come for closure. That's not how these things end. I just wanted to hear the bridge again. Every structure has its sound. This one CREAKS. Right near the center. Same spot where the ambassador once stood. Where the Soviet smiled. Where the briefcase changed hands and the story began. At least for me. I leaned on the rail, looked down at the river. It didn't remember anything. Water never does. Behind me, someone coughed. Just a passerby, but for half a second, I reached. For a gun, I no longer carried. Reflex, habit, muscle memory shaped by silence. Walked the rest of the bridge without stopping. Left the briefcase on the last bench before the east side. Empty, but heavy. The kind of heavy you don't measure in pounds. Asterisk if you're still here. Maybe you saw what others didn't. Subscribe. Some things don't belong in the archives, but they still deserve to be remembered.